Now, Sex and Secularism. That's the name of a new book by Joan Scott, cultural historian, scholar, and author. She's best known for her groundbreaking contributions to the study of social history in France, women's and gender history. Well, the central, if not provocative, argument of her most recent work is that secularism has been used to justify the subordination of women. The book has just been translated into French under the title La religion de la laïcité, and Joan Scott joins us on set today. Good morning, Joan.
Morning.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in. Why did you write this book, and how does it follow on from The Politics of the Veil, which looked at the debate surrounding headscarves worn by Muslim girls in schools here in France?
That's exactly what it does. It follows, it follows on that book. When I wrote The Politics of the Veil, I was struck by the fact that laïcité, laïcité in French, secularism in English, was the justification for passing the law. But it seemed to me that the history of secularism was a more complicated history than one that just insisted on the principles of separation of church and state, of religion not being part of whatever the public life of France was. And there were so many contradictions. The fact that French holidays, state holidays, are mostly Catholic holidays. The fact that there were all sorts of exceptions to the notion of the exclusion of religion from the public sphere. And then as a historian of women, I thought most of what second wave feminists had written about in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and I'm one of those second wave feminist historians, was the ways in which democracy, secularism, modernity had failed to include women, that the exclusion of women was part of what happened, for example, during the French Revolution or the American Revolution, that this history was a more complicated one than one that said laïcité, secularism, is a guarantee of the equality of women.
So you argue that the biggest threat to gender equality in the modern era is secularism. What are the parallels that you draw between secularism and gender inequality?
First of all, I don't think it's the biggest threat.
Right, okay.
I don't think secularism is the biggest threat to gender equality. I think that the claim made that secularism is a guarantee of gender equality is wrong historically and in the present. And that the notion of the thing that prevents us from seeing the limits that secularism pose for gender equality, the thing that prevents us from seeing that is the contrast with Islam and with the experience of Muslim women, which is said to represent everything that's bad for women. So it's that contrast between us and them, we who have equality, they who don't have equality, that stops us from seeing the fact that there are limits to the equality of women in Western modern societies as well.
Well, it's quite provocative subject matter given how proud France is when it comes to the principle of separation of the state from religious institutions. What's the French reaction been to the book so far?
Well, it depends on whom you talk to. There are some people who are very much who accept the argument that I'm making and who have been trying to make it for a very long time. That is, if you look at the difference in wages for men and women, if you look at the difficulty of access to politics, even with the parité law of 2000 in France, the ability for women to attain political office, to be involved in politics is limited. There are any number of areas where, if you look at the numbers of women in at the highest levels of corporations, you find glass ceilings. So there are all of these examples one can give, and there are many women, not only women and men in France who are cognizant of those problems. But on the other hand, of course, the reaction has been from some people has been, well, how can you say that? Laïcité is the guarantee of equality. Without it, we would have nothing.
The bedrock of France.
I don't disagree that the notion of individual possibility, that the dream of equality creates openings for reform, for demanding change that might not otherwise be there. But I also don't think that there's any guarantee in the way secular states have been organized that equality, gender equality, will follow.
I watched an interview where you said that hardline secularism is as bad as fundamentalist Islam. How so?
Well, I think it's because it won't grant the problems and the complexities and the difficulties. It insists that there is one truth, that secularism is the best way in the world, that it's the height of civilized accomplishment, and that there's no way that you can say that there are problems. And if you do say there are problems, the answer is, well, we're better off than anywhere else. And so it's always the contrast that comes in to refuse what the problems are. And it's a way, too, I think, of denying the fact that there are different groups in society, different kinds of women, different sorts of cultures and ethnicities and races that need all to be taken into account. That the notion that there's some homogenizing cultural process in which everybody becomes laïque in the same way is refused.
Well, it's nearly 1 year since the Harvey Weinstein scandal broke, triggering the Me Too and Time's Up movements, of course. Some have called this era a reckoning. What are your thoughts, and where do you see this all going?
I think the Harvey Weinstein scandal, the Me Too movement, has exposed a culture of male domination that persists. Despite all the reforms, despite the vote, despite the fact that there are more women in some jobs than there were before, despite the fact that you have a job, for example, in a major television studio, which wouldn't have been the case 30 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, there are definitely signs of improvement, of openings. But the culture of male domination, the sense of male entitlement continues. And it's been exposed, and it's not only Harvey Weinstein. He is not the rare exception. He's the symptom of a sense that there is male power that can demonstrate itself sexually, politically, economically, and that continues.
Okay. Joan Scott, thank you so much for your time. A reminder to those of you at home that Sex and Secularism, known under the title in French, La religion et la laïcité, de la laïcité, is out now. Joan Scott, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.